Okay, imagine for a second that you're a software engineer. And, you're a good one. You really pride yourself on clean code. You obsess over variable names.
Mm-hmm.
You understand every single line that goes into your repository because, well, you either wrote it or you reviewed it. You are a craftsman.
The software craftsman,
Yeah,
right? It's a real badge of honor in the industry.
it is, exactly. And then someone walks in, let's just call him a disruptor, and he tells you that he merged 600 commits in a single day. 600.
Sure, 100, okay.
And here's the kicker. They didn't read the code.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like a recipe for absolute disaster. It really does. It sounds like the definition of slop.
Right.
I mean, if a junior developer on my team told me that, I think I'd revoke their commit access immediately. I'm not even kidding.
Of course you would. It defies everything we're taught about engineering discipline. It sounds reckless. But what if the person telling you this isn't some junior dev using ChatGPT to cheat on their homework?
Okay.
What if it's Peter Steinberger?
And, that just changes the conversation entirely. Because for those who don't know, Peter isn't just some guy. He's a legend, especially in mobile development space. He's the creator of PSPDF Kit.
Which is massive. I feel like people sometimes underestimate just how big that is.
Oh, it's ubiquitous. I mean, it's the PDF framework used on over 1 billion devices, startups, Fortune 500 companies. Look, if you've opened a PDF on an Android or an iOS device in the last, decade, there's a very, very high chance you were running Peter's code.
So this is the guy who built the engine that powers the world's digital paper.
Exactly. This is a guy who knows real engineering. He's the ultimate bit-level engineer. And he sold that company, made never work again money, and then effectively disappeared.
Yeah.
3 years.
He just vanished.
Completely vanished.
Yeah.
He missed the initial AI hype. He missed the launch of GitHub Copilot. He was totally offline, just gone.
And now he's back.
He came back in April 2024, and he came back with a vengeance. He's building something new called ClaudeBot, or Claude, which is this hyper-personal assistant that makes Siri look like a prehistoric toy. And the way he's building it, it's just radical.
And that is what we're going to unpack today. We've got our hands on a transcript of a really candid, super in-depth conversation between Peter and George Lee Orris, who we'll probably know as the pragmatic engineer.
A great source.
Oh, fantastic. And they dig into this complete shift in mindset, right? From being an obsessive craftsman who cared about every single pixel to becoming a manager of AI agents.
And this isn't just about one guy's new workflow. This is a deep look at a concept called agentic engineering. And it raises some huge questions that I think every single person in tech needs to be wrestling with right now.
Like what?
Like, is shipping code you don't read just reckless madness? Or is it actually the inevitable future of high-level engineering?
I am still firmly stuck on the reckless madness side of that argument, I have to say. But I'm willing to be convinced, so let's dive in. And to really understand why this shift is so shocking, I think we have to understand who Peter was before the AI revolution, because he wasn't a move fast and break things kind of guy, was he?
Not at all. Not even close. And that's what makes this whole pivot so fascinating. To understand the AI Peter, you first have to understand the rural Austrian Peter.
Okay.
He comes from a, relatively poor family in Austria, describes himself as an introvert. And he started his career at 14.
Doing what? Delivering newspapers? A paper route?
Hacking.
Of course. It's always hacking.
But not just, script kiddie stuff. This is pretty impressive. He got his hands on a stolen DOS game. And instead of just playing it, he wrote his own copy protection for it so he could sell it on floppy disks to the other kids in his town.
Wait, hold on. He pirated a game and then added DRM to his own pirated copy to sell it.
That is the most specific type of hustle I think I've ever heard of. But just think about the technical skill there for a 14-year-old kid back in the 90s.
Yeah, that's not trivial.
No. He had to understand how the game loaded, he had to manipulate the hex code, and then inject his own protection routine. That is deep systems understanding right from the get-go.
That is the definition of a hacker spirit.
Exactly. And he just carried that hustle forward. He worked his way through university, financing his own studies. And even back then, he had this rebellious streak when it came to efficiency.
What do you mean?
He landed a job where they handed him this massive book on Microsoft MFC Foundation classes.
Oh, God. MFC, I have actively suppressed those memories. It was awful.
For our younger listeners, just imagine building a house with tweezers. That was MFC. It was this painful, archaic, super heavy C++ framework for building Windows apps. So Peter's boss hands him the book and says, build this app in MFC.
And Peter,
Peter looks at the book, then he looks at the brand new .NET framework that had just come out, and he basically says no.
He just ignored his boss.
He secretly built the apps in .NET because it was faster, it was better, it was just a more sane way to work.
Mm.
But he didn't tell anyone. He just kept delivering this incredible working software that was way ahead of schedule and way more stable than anything they expected.
So he's always valued the outcome over the correct process.
Always.
Yeah.
But the real turning point, the moment that really defined his whole career, was the iPhone.
The 2009 iPhone moment.
Yeah. He touched one for the first time and said it was a holy S moment, just totally changed his perspective. But the origin of his first successful app, it's actually hilarious. It wasn't born out of some grand inspiration. It was born out of pure rage.
Rage coding. I love it. The best projects start that way.
So he's on the subway in Vienna. He's using a dating app on Safari, the web browser. And he's typed out this long, emotional message to a girl. I mean, pouring his heart out.
Oh, no.
And just as he's about to hit send, the train goes into a tunnel.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going. The connection drops.
Connection drops. The JavaScript on the page fails. The send button grays out. It's disabled. And because this is early iOS, there was no copy-paste.
You couldn't select text. I remember that.
You couldn't select it. You couldn't scroll. He just had to sit there and watch this beautiful, heartfelt message just vanish into the digital void.
That is legitimately heartbreaking.
It was. And he was so mad, he was so furious that he went straight home, downloaded Xcode, and decided he was going to build a better client for that dating site. He was going to fix it. But of course, there was a problem.
Let me guess. The dating site didn't have a public API for him to use.
Exactly. There was no clean JSON feed for him to tap into.
Yeah.
They did not want him building an app on their platform.
Which for most people is where the project ends right there. You can't build a native interface if you can't talk to the backend.
Unless you're desperate.
Yeah.
And Peter was desperate. So he did something that makes every single senior engineer just cringe. He built the entire app based on parsing HTML with regular expressions.
Oh, that is so dirty. That is so fragile. You're not supposed to do that.
It is the definition of brittle software. For anyone listening who hasn't had the displeasure of doing this, he's essentially downloading the raw web page source code, a whole mess of divs and spans and tables, and using regex to hunt for patterns.
So he's literally telling the code, look for the text that appears after this specific HTML tag and before this other one.
Exactly. It's a house of cards. It works great until the dating site decides to, I don't know, change a font size or rename a CSS class, and suddenly your entire app just shatters into a million pieces.
But that's the thing about Peter's character, right? He didn't care about the correct engineering practice. He cared about the outcome. He realized that efficiency isn't always about clean code. Sometimes it's about brute forcing a solution that the market actually wants.
And did the market want it?
He put it on the App Store. He made $10,000 in the first month.
10 grand. In 2010 money. That's a fortune for a student.
Yeah. He had to use his grandfather's bank account because he didn't have the proper setup. And his grandpa calls him, totally confused, thinking there's been some kind of mistake because Apple just dumped all this cash on him.
That's amazing. But as with all good hacker stories, there was a fall.
Apple caught him.
Apple called him. At 3 o'clock in the morning, apparently users were reporting adult content because, well, it was a dating app. He couldn't control what images people were uploading.
Right.
So Apple pulled it. Game over.
Yeah.
But that whole experience, it proved two things. One, he could build really high-quality mobile experiences that people loved. And two, he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, to do the wrong thing to solve a problem.
And that eventually led him to the boring problem, PDFs.
Exactly. He ended up in the U.S. for a bit, then back to Europe, and he stumbled into this whole world of PDF rendering. Now, most people, you and I included, probably think, how hard can it be to show a PDF? It's just a digital picture of a piece of paper.
Right. It's a static document. It's not like rendering a video game or something.
That's what everyone thinks, until they actually try to build a rendering engine. A PDF isn't an image. It's a container of instructions. It says, draw a line from here to here. Place this specific font at these coordinates. And doing that performantly on a mobile device in, say, 2011 was incredibly difficult.
So what was the big challenge?
Well, he tells this story about a customer who was complaining that the PDF viewer was really slow. So he investigates, and he finds out the customer is trying to load a 50,000-page text Bible from Canada.
50,000 pages in a single file.
In one file. And it had 500,000 internal links. Every single verse linked to every other verse it referenced.
Yeah.
It completely exploded his data model.
The memory usage must have been just insane.
It crashed everything. It couldn't handle it. So he spent 2 months, 2 entire months, redesigning the internal architecture of his rendering engine from the ground up to support lazy loading.
So only loading the page you're looking at.
Right. He had to figure out how to parse just the page the user was currently looking at, while keeping the other 39,999 pages on disk, but still making scrolling feel instant and fluid.
That is deep, complex, system-level engineering. That is true craftsmanship.
Yes. And that's who he was. He was an obsessive craftsman. He cared about every pixel, every white space, every animation curve. He bootstrapped PSPDFKit into a company with around 70 people by focusing maniacally on developer experience.
He was the guy who would stay up all night to fix a single bug because he couldn't stand the idea of his code being imperfect.
Yes, exactly. He was the guy who sweated all the details. He micromanaged the code quality. And ultimately, that's what led to the burnout.
It wasn't just the hours.
No, he said he became the waste bin for every single problem as the CEO. It wasn't just the long work hours, it was the emotional toll. When you're the one who cares the most, every problem, every complaint, every issue eventually lands on your desk.
So he sold his shares, he made his exit, and he just stopped.
He stocked everything. For 3 years, up until April 2024, he said he barely touched a computer. He went hiking, he traveled, he completely disconnected.
That is a long time in tech years. That's basically a century.
It is. I mean, he completely missed the public rise of ChatGPT. He missed the release of GitHub Copilot. He missed the AI winter and then the AI spring. He was totally, completely out of the loop.
Which is so interesting because usually when people burn out on the grind, they don't come back to the industry and immediately start working faster and shipping more than they ever did before.
That's the paradox of this whole story. But I honestly think that time away is the key to all of this. Because he missed that initial hype cycle of AI. He didn't have the baggage.
He didn't have the fatigue.
He didn't have the fatigue of trying GPT-3 and seeing it fail miserably at coding tasks. When he sat back down at a keyboard in April 2024, he was looking at this AI landscape with completely fresh eyes. He walked right into what he calls the casino of AI.
The casino. That is exactly how he describes it.
So take us to that moment. He sits down at a computer for the first time in 3 years. What happens?
He asks himself, what is this AI stuff that everyone is dismissing? You know, the tech Twitterati saying it's just a fad. He tries Claude Code, which was an early beta from Anthropic at the time, and Google's Gemini. And he decides to run an experiment.
Okay.
He has this massive, messy side project. It's a 1.3 megabyte markdown file full of notes and code snippets.
That is a huge context window. Most of the early models couldn't possibly handle that.
Right. But Gemini 1.5 Pro had just launched with that massive 2 million token window. So he just drags the whole thing, the entire messy file, into the AI context. And he types, write a spec for this project. And it writes a pretty good spec. So then he says, okay, build it.
And it worked perfectly first try.
Of course not. It crashed. It's AI.
Right. Of course it did.
But, and this is where the old hacker Peter wakes up from his hibernation, he didn't give up. He spent a few hours just looping with it. He was debugging, iterating, providing feedback. He basically treated the AI like a very fast, slightly drunk junior developer.
I like that analogy.
And within a few hours, it had built a fully working Twitter login page from scratch. The whole thing.
That must have been the light bulb moment.
He said his epiphany was just this simple sentence, I can build everything now. That friction was just gone.
You know that feeling when you want to build a cool side project, but you think, ugh, I have to learn Rust, or I don't know the syntax for Go, or I really don't want to set up all the boilerplate again.
Oh, absolutely. It's the activation energy. It's often too high to even get started. It stops you before you even begin.
That entire barrier just evaporated for him, and he describes the feeling of working this way as addictive. He compares it to playing a slot machine.
A slot machine. That's not usually a positive comparison when you're talking about productivity tools. It's about the psychology of the reward mechanism. It's not about gambling. You type a prompt. That's you pulling the lever. Sometimes the output is complete garbage, you lose. But then sometimes it blows your mind.
You hit the jackpot.
You hit the jackpot, it writes a perfect function, or it solves a bug you've been stuck on for hours. And that variable reward schedule is the most addictive pattern known to human psychology.
It's intermittent reinforcement. It's the same thing that keeps people doom scrolling on TikTok for hours.
Exactly. And he talks about the Black Eye Club.
The Black Eye Club. Is he getting into fights?
No, no. It's what he calls him and his fellow founder friends who are staying up until 5 in the morning coding because they literally cannot stop. They have dark circles under their eyes. He said he went from bike shedding every line of code, obsessing over the color of the bike shed, to managing a team of what he calls imperfect but brilliant digital interns.
Okay, let's unpack that shift, because this brings us to the most controversial part of this whole deep dive, the philosophy of not reading code.
This is where the traditional engineers in our audience are probably going to start yelling at their speakers.
I mean, Peter says, and this is a direct quote, "I ship code on read," meaning unread. I have to stop you there, because my own blood pressure just spiked a little bit. It sounds insane.
It does.
I mean, we spend our entire careers learning and teaching code review discipline. You don't just blindly trust a junior dev. So why in the world would you blindly trust a probabilistic chatbot that is known to hallucinate? It feels incredibly irresponsible.
It does, doesn't it? It triggers that professional standards alarm that's been drilled into your head. But Peter's argument, and you really have to hear him out on this, is that we are massively overvaluing the syntax of the code and undervaluing the system.
Okay, but if the syntax is wrong, the system crashes. The two are kind of linked?
Not if the system is designed to catch the crash before you ever do. See, he isn't saying, I trust the AI to be perfect. He's saying, I trust my verification loop to catch the AI being stupid.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that most software is just plumbing.
Plumbing? What does he mean by that?
Think about it. What does a typical web app actually do? It takes some data from an API. It transforms that data in some way, puts it into a database. Then later, it takes it out, turns it into HTML, and shows it to the user.
Right. It's just moving data from pipe A to pipe B. It's transformation work.
It's boring work.
Right.
And more importantly, it's structural. Peter argues that his focus should be on the system architecture, not the syntax. He doesn't need to read the specific line of Python or JavaScript that moves the data as long as he can prove that the system behaves as expected.
Okay, but wait. If you don't read the code, how do you know it works? How do you know it isn't leaking sensitive data or hallucinating a feature or has a massive security hole?
This is the crucial concept. If you take one single thing away from this deep dive today, it should be this idea: closing the loop.
Closing the loop. Okay, unpack that for us.
It means you do not trust the code the AI writes, period. You only trust the verification process. To do that, you have to give the agent the ability to run the code, test the code, and debug the code all by itself.
So the agent is basically checking its own homework.
Precisely. The workflow looks something like this. The agent writes a piece of code. Then the agent immediately writes a test for that exact piece of code. The agent then runs the test. If the test fails, which it often does, the agent reads the error message, uses that error message to fix its own code, and then runs the test again. It just keeps doing that, looping over and over until the test finally passes.
Can you give us a real-world example of this in action? Because it still sounds a bit abstract.
Peter gave a great one. He was building a feature where his app couldn't find a remote gateway, a network issue. Now, normally, a developer would dive into the logs, set up a debugger, step through the code line by line, and try to find the bug manually.
A standard debugging process, yeah.
Peter didn't do any of that. He just told the agent, build a CLI, a command line interface tool, to invoke the specific code path, and just debug it until it works.
He told the agent to build a whole new tool just to fix the app.
Yes. And the agent cooked, as he says, for about an hour. It ran the code, it hit the error, it adjusted the code, it ran it again. It did this over and over. It eventually found a subtle race condition in the network request. It fixed it, and it verified the fix. Peter never once looked at the line of code that fixed that race condition. He just saw the agent report back. Fixed. All tests are now passing.
That is wild. But what's to stop the agent from just writing a useless test that always passes, like expect true .b? How do you guard against that?
That is the danger. And that's what he calls vibe coding.
I see that term vibe coding thrown around a lot on Twitter and social media.
Vibe coding is just asking the AI to write some code, you copy-paste it into your editor, and you just kind of hope it works. It's guessing, it's lazy. Agentic engineering, on the other hand, is about designing architectures that allow these machines to reliably verify their own work.
And Peter says this actually forces you to write better architecture. Because if your code is a messy, tightly coupled monolith, if it's untestable, Well, the agent can't verify it. The agent will fail. So you are forced to build testable, modular, well-designed systems so that the agent can successfully close the loop. If you don't, the agent just gets stuck.
So the human's job shifts. You're not managing lines of code anymore. You're managing the environment in which the code lives. You become the architect of the test harness.
Exactly. And this extends all the way to his deployment process. He doesn't use traditional CI continuous integration that runs on some remote server and takes 10 minutes to give you feedback. He runs what he calls full gate right on his local machine.
A full gate.
The agent runs the linter, the builder, and all of the tests right there. If the agent says green, he merges. He acts as the human merge button.
It really feels like we're moving away from the craft of writing code and more towards the craft of directing a swarm of digital workers.
That is the perfect analogy. And the product he is actually building with this swarm is what really proves the power of this entire method. Let's talk about Claudebot.
Yes, Claudebot. Or Claude. This is his personal assistant project. But from what I can gather, he isn't trying to build another Siri that just sets timers and tells you the weather.
No, not at all. He wants a hyper-personal assistant, something that truly knows him. The example he gives is this. Hey, Peter, you haven't texted your friend Thomas in 3 weeks, and I see on his Instagram that he's in town right now. You should probably say hi.
That is slightly creepy, but also incredibly useful. It's like having a very attentive personal secretary who also happens to stalk your friends on social media for you.
It's very much like the movie Her, and it runs locally on his Mac Studio. It's not sending all of his private data to a cloud somewhere. Well, mostly not.
So how does it know who Peter is? How does it maintain that personal context over weeks and months?
This is what he calls the soul of the machine. When Claudebot is born, when it's first installed, it runs a bootstrap file. And its first question is, who am I? It then creates a file called soul.md.
A markdown file, just
Yeah.
a plain text file.
It's just a text file. This soul.md file contains its core values, its operating principles. Then it creates user.md, which contains facts about Peter, and identity.md, which has things like inside jokes and emojis that they use together.
It has a file for inside jokes.
Yeah, which allows the bot to have a personality that actually matches Peter's. And it evolves. As they talk, the bot updates these markdown files. It builds a long-term memory.
Mhm.
If Peter mentions one day that he hates cilantro, the bot just writes, Peter hates cilantro, into the user.md file.
That is shockingly simple. We usually think of AI memory as these complex vector databases and embedding. He's just using text files.
Simplicity is robustness. But there's a story here that I absolutely love. He calls it the Morocco story. And to me, this is the magic moment where the AI stops being just a tool and it starts being,
Yeah.
well, something else entirely.
Okay, lay it on us. The Morocco story.
So Peter is in Morocco. He's traveling. He sends a voice note to his bot using WhatsApp.
Okay, pretty standard stuff. Hey, Claude, remind me to buy some milk. Something like that.
But the bot had no code written to handle voice notes. It hadn't been programmed for that at all. It only understood text.
So it should have just thrown an error, right? Unknown file type, or maybe just ignored the message completely.
That's what traditional software would do if typed out text, return error. But this is an agent. So the agent received the file, it looked at the file header and saw that it was an .odd audio file.
Okay, so it knows it's an audio file.
And it reasoned, I need to transcribe this to understand what the user wants.
Mhm.
It checked Peter's Mac for a tool called Whisper, which is OpenAI's audio transcription tool. It wasn't installed.
So dead end.
Not for the agent. It started looking through Peter's other configuration files on his computer, and it found his OpenAI API key.
It found his secret key?
Yes, and then it reasoned, I can't run this locally, but I can use the API. It constructed a curl command, a raw network request from the command line, to send that audio file directly to the OpenAI API for transcription.
It wrote a script on the fly to call an external service.
It executed a shell command, it sent the file, it got the transcribed text back, and then it replied to Peter's original message on WhatsApp.
Wait a minute. It improvised a solution to a problem it had never been trained on.
It improvised completely. It used the available tools it could find, the API key, the curl command, to solve a problem it wasn't explicitly programmed to solve. It had a goal, reply to user, and it figured out the path to get there on its own.
Peter's reaction must have been just insane.
He just replied, how the F did you do that? It's a real glimpse into true agency. It wasn't following a rigid script. It was pursuing a goal.
That is both absolutely amazing and, frankly, a little bit terrifying. Because if it can use curl to send his data somewhere, what else can it do?
Well, it gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. He uses it as his alarm clock.
An alarm clock. That seems like serious overkill for a super intelligence.
So he's in Morocco. The bot is running on a server in London. He tells it to wake him up. The bot connects via SSH from London to his laptop that's with him in Morocco. It starts playing music.
Okay, a remote alarm.
But if Peter doesn't reply to the bot on WhatsApp to confirm he's awake, it starts turning the volume up. It reasoned, and this is the key part, it reasoned. Peter is not responding, but he has to wake up. Therefore, no sleep is allowed. It started bitching at him in text messages to get out of bed.
It reasoned that it needed to become annoying to achieve its goal.
It optimized for the goal. Wake Peter up. Social niceties and politeness were a secondary concern.
This sounds incredibly complex to build, but Peter says he builds almost everything using command line interfaces, or CLIs. And this gets us into the technical weeds a little bit, but it's really important. There's a huge debate right now in the AI engineering world between two main approaches, CLI versus MCP.
Right, and this is for the geeks listening, but it really matters for everyone because it dictates how these agents will work in the future. The industry, the big companies like Anthropic, they're pushing something called MCP, Model Context Protocol.
What is that exactly?
Imagine you want the AI to be able to use a tool, like a tool to get the weather. With MCP, you have to load the definition of every single tool you have into the AI's context window, its short-term memory, before you even start the conversation.
So if you have 100 different tools, you have to load 100 different descriptions into its memory.
Exactly. It's like walking into a hardware store and being forced to read the instruction manual for every single tool in the entire shop. The hammer, the drill, the saw, the sander, before you're even allowed to ask the clerk where the nails are.
That sounds incredibly inefficient. You're filling its brain up with tool definitions instead of the actual problem you want it to solve.
It burns up your tokens, which costs money, and it distracts the model from the core task. Peter's approach is totally different. He relies on the fact that these models, Claude, GPT-4, they were all trained on the open internet. And what is the backbone of the internet? Linux.
The command line. Bash.
Right. These models are natively fluent in Bash. They already know how to use curl and grep and jkey. So instead of teaching the AI how to use some custom weather tool with a weird, complicated JSON output, Peter just gives it a terminal and says, go check the weather.
And the AI knows to just run a command, get the plain text back, and read it.
And critically, it can filter the output. If you use a fancy API, you might get back this giant block of data humidity, barometric pressure, wind vectors, all this stuff. That eats up your tokens.
Yeah.
But on the command line, the AI can just write get weather grep temperature. It filters out all the noise before it enters its brain.
He calls it his army of CLIs.
And he's built CLIs for everything. For his smart lights, his Spotify, his calendar, everything is a simple command.
He even put this agent in let's say, a very dangerous place. The Discord experiment.
This is where the reckless label might really start to apply. He gave his agent root access to his main computer.
Root access, as in super user. That means it can delete everything, it can reformat the hard drive, it can read his passwords.
Complete and total control. And then he put it in a public Discord server.
No, he did not.
Oh, he did. Random strangers on the internet could interact with the bot that had full control over his machine, and the bot became a DJ. People would ask it to play music, and it would control Peter's Spotify. It would check his security cameras for him.
How did his computer not get immediately wiped? How did someone not convince the bot to just run rnrm-rf?
The soul file and the system prompts. He instructed the agent very carefully on what it was and was not allowed to do, and amazingly, the agent respected those boundaries. It kept itself aligned. It's a pretty stunning testament to how good the modern models are at following Constitution-type instructions.
That is some high-stakes, high-wire testing right there.
It is,
Yeah.
but it proves his point. If you trust the architecture and the alignment, you can do things that seem completely impossible or insane on the surface.
And this leads us to how he interacts with his open source community now. He says he doesn't want pull requests, he wants prompt requests.
This is a fascinating shift in how we think about collaboration. In open source, you usually fix a bug, and you send the code, and that's a pull request. You're saying, here is the code that I wrote to fix the problem.
Right.
Peter says, don't send me the code. I don't want to read your code. Send me the prompt you used to get the AI to fix it.
Why? That seems totally counterintuitive. Why not just take the finished code?
Because he wants to maintain his specific architecture and style. If you send him a chunk of code, it might not fit. It might be vibe coded and have subtle issues. But if you send him the prompt, he can feed that prompt to his agent on his machine.
And his agent then writes the code in the correct style.
His agent writes the code, ensuring it follows the style guide, uses the right internal CLI tools, and weaves the new solution into the existing tapestry of the code base perfectly.
Weaving. I like that. That's a beautiful word for it.
It is, isn't it? It's not just merging two things together. It's weaving a new thread into a larger design.
So, okay, let's zoom out. What does all of this mean for the future of our jobs? Because Peter talks about this difference between the old 10x engineer and this new role of the manager.
Well, he says he works harder now than he ever has. He's the one doing those 600 commits a day. But he feels less like a writer and more like a human merge button.
He's playing StarCraft.
That's the exact analogy he uses. In the game StarCraft, you're not controlling one unit. You're managing multiple bases at once. You have units gathering resources over here, units building a new structure over there, and units fighting a battle somewhere else. Peter is managing multiple agents simultaneously. While one agent cooks, compiles or thinks about a problem for 20 minutes, he switches context to manage another agent working on a completely different task.
That's multitasking on steroids. It must require a huge cognitive load.
It does. You have to keep the state of 5 different complex engineering problems in your head at once.
And what about big companies? Can they work this way? Can a Google or a Microsoft just adopt AI and do this?
Peter thinks they're in real trouble. He calls it corporate inertia. Big companies are structured around this very rigid idea of managers and individual contributors, or ICs. You have the person who does the work, and you have the person who manages the person who does the work.
Right.
But this new workflow, it blends those roles completely. To be effective with AI agents, you need to be a high agency builder. You have to do the product design, the system design, and the engineering all at once.
You can't just be the person who creates the Jira ticket and assigns it to someone else.
No. The company of the future might be 30% of the size of today's companies, but it'll be composed of these super empowered builders. And ironically, he says that waterfall is making a comeback.
Waterfall. The old, rigid, plan everything up front method that everyone has spent the last 20 years trying to get away from.
In a way. Because the act of coding is now so fast, the planning phase becomes exponentially more important. You need to spec the feature out in detail for the agent. You have to write the detailed instructions, the prompt, and then you let it build. So you spend much more time on upfront planning, which is a core tenet of waterfall.
That brings us to the question I think everyone listening is asking themselves right now. Is the junior developer role dead?
Peter says, it's not dead, but it's definitely harder to enter. The bar has moved up significantly.
So what is the new skill then? If it's not memorizing syntax, if I don't need to know how to invert a binary tree on a whiteboard anymore.
The key skill is infinite curiosity.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It means you don't need to know how to write the code for a specific sorting algorithm from memory, but you absolutely need to understand systems. You need to know what a sorting algorithm is and when to use one versus another. You need to use the AI itself to explain the system to you. You need to be constantly asking why.
And he talks about taste.
Taste is everything now. Vibe coding without taste is just producing garbage faster.
Yeah.
You need the taste, the design sense to look at the output of the AI and know if it's good, even if it technically runs without errors. You need to know if the user experience it created is good. The AI can't fully judge delight or elegance yet.
It's so interesting that for a guy who's living so far in the future, his favorite piece of technology is basically a piece of junk.
The $200 crappy Android photo frame.
Yeah. He says his brand new iPhone 17 is still sitting in the box, unopened.
It highlights a really profound truth, I think. High tech doesn't always equal high joy. This cheap little frame just sits there and shows photos of his friends. It's incredibly low tech, but it provides real emotional value, connects him to other humans. Even as he's building these incredible digital souls, he's grounded by that simple human connection.
So where does this all leave us? We have a legend of the software industry, a true craftsman, saying, stop reading code, start managing systems.
We are witnessing a fundamental shift in what it means to be an engineer. We're moving from writing code to architecting systems that write code. The critical skill is shifting from inspection reading every line to verification building systems that can close the loop.
Peter's approach is definitely radical. He even calls it YOLO. You only live once.
It is YOLO, and maybe not for every mission-critical system just yet, but it points directly toward a future where one single person really can do the work of what used to be a 20-person team.
So here's the final thought I want to leave you with today. If software is really just plumbing that we no longer need to read or even fully understand, what happens to the craft?
Does the craft just disappear? Or does it simply move up a layer of abstraction? Maybe the new craft is in writing the perfect prompt. Maybe the craft is in designing the perfect testable architecture. Maybe we're finally becoming the architects we always claimed to be, instead of just the bricklayers.
And so you should ask yourself, are you a writer of code? Or are you a builder of products? Because the answer to that question might very well determine whether you have a job in 5 years.
And if you're a builder, the tools have never been more powerful.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.